Welcome to the Sabbath afternoon Bible study as we continue to advance along the upward trail to refine all doctrines. The church offered milk teachings yesterday that today we may receive adult teeth. This allows us to meet the mission that Adam elected, the burden to discern good over evil by way of the haunting path of death. Once learned today, we can worship God in spirit and in truth so as to win life. This growth requires litigation by God's Jewish lawyer, who, unlike his renegade Jewish brethren, finally passes the bar. This study will exemplify the acuity of his theological litigations. But those who refuse to graduate from kindergarten ethics, assuming they are graced to win salvation, and Ken, I got good news for you, still prevail. However, they will have eternal, divinely appointed elders, men to shepherd them by God's assigned governors. Thus, this series is entitled Reformation Wins Revival. It is given to express to the dutiful and faithful the need to become the shepherds who reform the church's immature doctrines. But the task meets resistance since children, when their errors of theology are exposed, fight like hell. I mean that expression literally. Fight like hell to mask the embarrassment of their juvenescence. Last study proved that they thereby need God's ordained Jewish lawyer to parse his legal and constitutional standards. So today, March the 1st, 2025, I present the title of Study 51.7. It is entitled Part 2 of Jewish Soliloquy. It depicts the ultimate battle against the Goliathians who rule Christian doctrine. Goliath is a prophetic depiction of powerful men today who exhibit his same crass profanity against Christ. Like a poetic soliloquy, David, God's star Jew, shall rise again to defeat Goliath in his war against Christ. The churches need no longer to tremble at the threat of his supernatural power, for Goliath's own sword shall cut off his head. It will defeat the perverse theology of masonry, the cunning craftiness against which Paul forewarned. Jesus called these apostate Jewish theologians of Masonic infiltration corrupt lawyers when he said, "Woe unto you, lawyers, for ye have taken away the key of knowledge. Ye enter not in yourselves, and them that were entering ye hindered." Luke chapter 11, verse 52. The key of knowledge is the Bible basis required to validate all doctrines. Masonry is Goliath's medium to dodge doctrinal scrutiny, for it demands, by the penalty of death, secrecy to advance their deceptions. They have no wisdom to give, only Satan's fears of Bible challenge, because, like Goliath's armor, his doctrines are fragile. He knows that if put under the test of courtroom cross-examination, he will be exposed as a fool before the universe. Therefore, by exploiting human laziness to search the Bible for themselves, Satan assigns hand-picked leaders from his Masonic initiated elites to peddle his profanities in the Lord's church. This he does to circumvent Bible evidence, the key of knowledge. To prevail, church saints can preclude this sophistry by simply heeding to the incessant appeals of others who offer Bible evidence. Offer evidence. Is not such the simple mission of a Bible lawyer, also known as an evangelist? In fact, the Lord, in the face of Goliathian intimidation, has ordained such men to proclaim his word ever since Calvary. In this way does the Lord prove to the onlooking heavenly witnesses of this great controversy that faithfulness to Christ can defeat Lucifer. Even now, others who had no Bible faith yesterday can still be rescued to win a seat in this mustard seed kingdom. Though an inferior option for entry, they can be prodded by the witness of soon-to-be displayed dramatic miracles. Dramas serving as their cattle prod of encouragement to leave the sidelines and become energized for God. However, having beforehand opted out of the higher call of faith, their entry yields the lower station, that of sheep, not of shepherds. David promises as much when he said, "He that walketh in a perfect way, he shall serve me." Psalms 101, verse 7. How does the perfect Bible lawyer serve Christ? As promised to Peter, he guards the gates to enforce legal kingdom entry. Thereby, we can affirm the theme articulated in part 1 of this study, that which explains God's need for a Jewish lawyer. Did not Christ command that we resist the devil and he will flee from us? James chapter 4, verse 7. Problem is that until today, we have been too undergraduate, too kindergarten, too Sesame Street to forge the necessary courtroom gravitas to rebuke Satan. And like taking candy from a baby, his deceptions have won the day. For example, can you believe that Christians teach that the Jews who rejected Christ are the favored people of God? Can a man be more infantile in logic than to think that the murder of the only begotten could elevate them above the faithful Jews, the Lord's disciples at Pentecost? Such men of trite thinking could never rebuke the devil. He would thoroughly berate such imbeciles in courtroom battle. And rightfully so, because like voting for Donald Trump, such a man is proven to exalt Satan as virtuous. I remember even myself as a Saturday Sabbath keeper in evangelism. Instead of wholly using the key of knowledge, the Bible, I also sought to validate the Sabbath over Sunday worship by arguing that the nominal Jews were also Seventh-day Sabbath keepers. Instead of winning the argument to give credence to Seventh-day Adventism, such only gave credence to their treachery and discredit to my immature efforts at evangelism. As stated in part 1, the 74,000 Jews over the age of 20 who emerged from Egyptian slavery some 3,500 years ago were the first collection of Jews to ever exist. Yet all 74,000 of them, except for Caleb, were denied entry into the Promised Land. The same discredit is replete throughout their history until Calvary. Only this graduated Jew has the key of knowledge to define Jewish value to God. Indeed, after the Exodus and before Calvary, Jeremiah denounced even the very children of the original 74,000 Egyptian escaping Jews, accusing them to be worse than their fathers. What could be worse? It was their misuse of their brilliant legal acumen to deceive their own children from Christ by replacing his law with self-created fables. That was worse than idolatry. This key of knowledge, as I've explained it to you, is validated in the following text in Jeremiah. And it shall come to pass, Jeremiah, when thou shalt show this people, the Jews, all these words, and they shall say unto thee, wherefore hath the Lord pronounced all this great evil against us? Or what is our iniquity? Or what is our sin that we have committed against the Lord our God? Then shalt thou say unto them, because your fathers have walked after other gods, and have not kept my law, and ye have done worse than your fathers. For behold, ye walk every one after the imagination of his evil heart, that they may not hearken unto me. Therefore will I cast you into a land that ye know not, and there shall ye serve other gods day and night. Where? I will not show you favor. Jeremiah chapter 16, verses 10 through 13. This took place some 900 years after the Exodus and 600 years before Calvary. Then Jeremiah said that they could not claim divine favor. To believe otherwise was, to quote the popular Motown Temptation song, just by imagination. Bible evidence says, I will not show you favor. But we wonder, how could the evocation of private ideas or imaginations be deemed worse than faithlessness in Christ, the crime that condemned their forefathers? You see, it is worse because they became de facto Luciferians, his angels, men who sought to seduce the righteous to not hearken to Christ. Thus, for evangelizing their fables above the law, they were again disbarred. Don't you see? Seeking to protect one's pride by using your own intellectual creativity to seduce the children is worse than idolatry. Honoring the devil, though illegal, was not as bad because Lucifer once had a higher post under Christ, whereas they had for themselves no credibility. Also, the temptations of Lucifer require intellectual gravity to defeat, but the creative imaginations of their head had no anchor of authority. For a man must know that the ideas of his head are self-conjured. Such violates the key of knowledge and is the basis of Masonry. Thus do I repeat the basis for their disfavor. It says, ye have done worse than your fathers, for behold, ye walk every one after the imagination of his evil heart, that they may not hearken unto me. Unlike Shiloh, the promised quintessential Jew of clarification by this study, they, instead of tying their foal to the choice vine, so as to drink his new wine, they used their legal gravitas to deceive the masses with their brain-squeezed vinegar. At least Lucifer had a resume of previous grandeur. The Jews had none of their own, so they found comfort in the damnation of their own unsuspecting children. The same treachery prevails today. Like Satan, the Gentiles, by use of imaginary Jewish doctrines, have flooded the church with falsehood, creating temptations and dire need to be reformed. These were doctrines of the Talmud. I didn't say the Torah, the book of Moses, but the Talmud. They were themes that could never pass the test of a legal courtroom cross-examination. So the lodge dwellers are made to swear to guard their doctrines in secrecy. Worse still, because they were a false halo, one that presumes God's special favor on the Jews, the Sesame Street Gentile Christians falter by that gullibility. Time allows that I cite just a few examples of these cunningly crafty deceits. One such deception is that the sons of God of Genesis 6, beings whom they presumed to be angels, had sexual intercourse with human daughters of Adam to produce a super race that God had to destroy with the flood. To believe this is to reject the testimony of Jesus, which apostate Jews so do. For he uttered these words, now descending on your screen, when Jesus said angels don't marry. But the text of the confusion that they exploit says the following, to be exact. The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Genesis chapter 6, verse 2. Did not Paul warn that all must revisit Genesis, which he called the first principles of the oracles of God, and do so under the tutelage of an ordained teacher? I make reference to Hebrews chapter 5, verse 12. Thus, the eye of cross-examination by God's Jewish lawyer explains the true meaning. In synopsis, Cain disqualified himself as a son of God when he, according to Genesis 4:16, left the Lord to dwell in the land called Nod. His seed thereby did not inherit Adamic dominion and lost status as sons of God. So Adam forwarded that honor through Seth, whom he begot after Cain. But Cain's seed became the sons of men, never to survive the flood. Such is the fate of all who so choose to cease in their walk with Christ, and so gnawed away in damnation. Yet Cain produced beautiful daughters, that which the Bible refers to as daughters of men, who enticed Adam's sons of honor, causing them to nod away in the same addiction, yielding the need for the flood. So, by use of the Bible over imagination, we can know why Cain was excluded in the chapter called the generations of Adam, Genesis 5. For it only lists the genetic tributaries to man's long journey back to Eden, such as clarified in Isaiah 51. It does not include any of Cain's seed, only the sons of God, those who walk after righteousness. No matter the sin, they are men and women who trust the Lord's legal system to redeem them. It says, hearken to me, ye that follow after righteousness, ye that seek the Lord. Look unto the rock whence ye are hewn. Look unto Abraham your father, and unto Sarah that bare you. For the Lord shall comfort Zion, and he will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness shall be found therein, thanksgiving and the voice of melody. Isaiah 51, verses 1 through 3. Abraham was included in the distinction, not of Cain, but of the generations of Adam. And since it calls Abraham and Sarah our parents, then the generations of Adam is our so-called wheel of fortune. It brings us, the men who follow after righteousness, back to the garden of the Lord. The sons of God, then, are the men who follow after righteousness. Those today who reject their appeal, their names, as well as all the other sons and daughters of Adam, shall be deleted from the Lord's books, children unworthy of any mention. Then they, like the children of Cain, will also know that no matter the sin, it pays to never leave the Lord's house and dwell in the land of Nod. It pays to follow after righteousness. In fact, the antediluvians, that's a term fancy to make reference to the people who lived before the flood. So I say again, in fact, the antediluvians perished because before the flood, there was no established law. How could there be without a Jewish lawyer? Christ said as much in his testimony when he said, "But as in the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were marrying and given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." Matthew 24, verse 37 through 39. Men ate and drank and engaged in sexual intercourse as they so deemed. Thus does it say, they married and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. Destroying the world without a law. What injustice, some would argue. But the question then is the same as it is now. What good is the law without a lawyer to righteously interpret it to the people? More than that, what good is the law if the house of Judah, those who the Lord designated to be his lawyers, keep getting disbarred by their negligence as they supplant the law with their own imaginations? David adds credence to this soliloquy. He says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night." Psalms chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. Being destroyed in the flood without knowing. If this seems unfair, then understand the Lord's perspective. You don't get to know if you don't want to know. Rather than seeking the Lord's counsel, they trusted lawyers of their own esteem, men who have not passed the bar of God. Adam was told and rejected the Lord's counsel. Thus, destruction without a law is fair because the penalty of the antediluvians was the curse that Adam elected, death. That against which Christ forewarned would come by not following after righteousness. Have you learned to do better? Then why do you today profess to be Christians, yet you refuse to know? You ignore the Bible and follow the voice of the Goliathian serpent. All can better witness the cruel yoke that Adam, not Christ, has heaped upon his children. The same yoke that America has ratified by reaffirming the election of 666. Moving on, it is impossible for me in this 1-hour study to delineate and refute all the non-biblical doctrines that flood the church today. Most are contained in my prior publications. Today, I cite only a few to give a concise commentary by virtue of Jewish imaginations expressed through masonry, they whisper the claim that dark skin was a curse of Noah. Ergo, they justify it by saying, if you're white, you're right. If you're black, get back. In this animus of African features, they disparage Father's creative genius. After all, he created the races after the flood. Moses declared as much when he said, remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee. Thy elders, and they will tell thee. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 7 through 9. Genesis proves that 10 generations after Adam, Noah's 3 sons yielded the nations. His seed was distributed to all lands after the Tower of Babel. Christ inherited Israel. Jesus inherited the Gentiles, and Shiloh will gather them both under his dominion. Thus, a bias to elevate the European look manifests ungodliness. All must decry in this judgment hour any and all false preferences. For the nations were divided by God according to the number of his stars, the children of Israel, the 144,000, the sons of America's former slaves. Their talents should not be a mystery to men who, without covetousness, are careful to study for themselves and uncover the divinely inherited racial endowments bequeathed to them. The test for all races is, can the Bible save your mind from the domination of the carnal imaginations of others? All races came from Adam through Noah's triplets, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Honor to each is inferred by the listing of their names in the chapter called The Generations of Adam. Speaking now of one of his sons, Ham, Ham had 4 sons, one of which was Canaan. Canaan occupied not Africa, but the land of his name's sake, Canaan. It was he whom Noah cursed. What was the place of Ham's other children? Best clue is that David called Africa the land of Ham. And we know that the Lord's blessings were upon Ham's other children, as evidenced by the fact that Christ promised to bless Hagar, Abraham's Egyptian, ergo African's second wife. To boot, all of Israel, by 5 generational journey in Africa, Egypt, became a great nation, per Genesis 46:3, scrolling down on your screen. Yet the point must be hammered home. The children of Israel, by the Lord's legal accounting, were children not of Ham, but Shem. And by the edict of this bar-passing Jewish law lover, they were racially designated not by skin complexion, but by the house of their father, as you see scrolling evidence on your screen. As shown in part 1, when David, whose mother was not a Jew but a Canaanite, he was still deemed to be a bona fide Jew by virtue of his father Jesse. So when I say that Israel descended from Noah's son Shem, this infers spirituality and in no way infers skin complexion. Thusly do true Christians who walk by the Spirit and not by the flesh gain acuity in legal scholarship, as opposed to scholarship by the imaginative minds of bigots. Paul the apostle for the Gentiles gives an affirmation of this claim when he said, "There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus hath made me free from the law of sin and death, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please God." Romans chapter 8, verses 1 through 9. Thus favor or disfavor by virtue of one's blackness or whiteness, being a quality of the flesh, cast all mega Republicans on the condemned side of the law, and validates the conclusion that Confederate flag wavers are the Canaanites, the accursed of God today. The fact that they know it not puts them in the same brain-dead land of Nod, the same class of Noah's flood victims. Their ignorance will not spare them either. So you see, as in our secular courtroom halls of litigation, passage in God's judgment hour likewise requires theo-legal deliberation. But the question still haunts you. Why does God rely on David's jurisprudence when he, God, is all-wise? Of course, our very topical meaning of Jewish soliloquy depicts the grandeur of David's end-time son who re-renders the work of ancient David. This is so illustrated by the drama defined above with Goliath. To be perfect, then, as expressed by the counsel to the rich young ruler, scrolling on your screen, comes by victory over Adam's fall. David is honored because he follows Christ against all opposition. Such is godly, for God also trusts Christ. And so complying, Christ says, "My meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish his work." John 4, verse 34. David is that finishment. He succeeds where Adam fell. This is why God honors David's jurisprudence. Against Satan's claim, he proves that happiness can only come by the honor of Christ. And since Christ was Father's ordained power of attorney, then his Father's wisdom is exalted also. We are told as much. It says in John chapter 5, "For the Father judgeth no man, but hath committed all judgment unto the Son, that all men should honor the Son even as they honor the Father. He that honoreth not the Son honoreth not the Father which hath sent him. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word and believeth on him that sent me hath everlasting life, and shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death unto life." In John chapter 5, verse 22 through 24. So to risk David's ordained authority is to deny to oneself his short mercy. People are uncomfortable when they must expose the truth of themselves. Just like Adam and Eve hiding after the fall, as if Christ did not know the design of their naked bodies. But respectfully, the Lord just didn't drop in on them as they hid amongst the weeds. Instead, he honored their shyness. He called to them first. Today he sees man's nakedness too. But in shame they still hide. Not David. He exposes all past sins. And with his expertise in the law, he removes the shame of our lives. Having had his own feet washed by Christ, he can expose his tarnished path of journey so that when we remove our socks and shoes of concealment, he does as Peter was commanded and scrubs away the degradation of our feet. In short, David is the elected Jew who can vindicate us before God. I know that Jesus also claims this word. But by a different dimension, he vindicates the soon-to-be resurrected, while David vindicates the living who yearn to never see death. Proof, only living can have thirst. Thereby we are told in Isaiah 55, verse 1, Ho, everyone that thirsteth, incline your ear and come unto me, hear, and your soul shall live. And I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Behold, I have given him for a witness and commander to the people. Isaiah 55, verses 1 through 4. Accordingly, we can know that David has the legal skills in atonement, which is the bridge to at-one-ment with God. That in shame, you no longer need to weave your own leaves of concealment. Instead, accept from David the Lord's custom-made garments, that you may stand in righteousness before God. So by David's voice, Christ calls again to commune with you. This requires reformation from Lucifer's cunningly crafted doctrines. By open courtroom cross-examination, rebuking the devil to full flight. Many such falsehoods have already been cited by this publication. They are freely available upon request. Only a few can now be, at this time, re-represented. Another citation is that through Masonry, we have been distressed to alter our prayers to God under the ruse that God demands of us a correct Hebrew pronunciation of his name. In refutation of this ruse, the Lord's ordained Jews, his original disciples at Pentecost, have given us the formula to address God. But contrary to their teachings, the cunning grifters place a false premium on the Hebrew tongue. Hebrew is a language that has been extinct for more than 2,000 years. Duped to emphasize the contrived Jewish version of his name in Hebrew, you will hear many Christians in Sesame Street naivete convert letter J by giving it the letter Y phonics. You hear them calling Jacob Yakub, Jesus Yeshua, God Yahweh, etc. Such reveals the unseen hand of Masonry amongst us. An entire book, Mustard Seed Chronicle, Book 3.3, entitled The Bible, Our Sacred Tongue, makes the shambles of this falsity. It shows how Satan's sophistry cannot pass open cross-examination by a Jewish lawyer who has passed the bar. Thus, like a candy-peddling pervert in the park, police being off patrol, Satan deems to molest the Lord's children in secret. Goliath does not want to again lose his head to David in this second part of the Lord's Jewish soliloquy. But to no avail, for Christ promised the serpent that the seed of the woman will crush his ego, his head. In this vein do I refute another doctrinal ruse that, no matter how flattering, must now be dashed. Contrary to the teachings of many now, Jesus cannot be defined as a black man or a white man. Hebrew Israelites, a fringe group of African Americans who themselves have sprouted out of not Christianity but Masonry, now spew this theme. And it seems to have resonated in high places. Men of dubious characters such as Vladimir Putin, the Pope, and even Donald Trump now park pedal this candy. It reminds me of the cartoon villain who, by the pretext of goodwill, gives his nemesis a birthday cake. Problem: a stick of dynamite was guised as a candle. Similarly, are the Hebrew Israelites facing the same treachery by flattery. As was the case with ancient Aaron, God now calls them to rise from oppression so that by conversion they may again be ordained as the Lord's priest to manage his temple. So I give a bit more of their history. They were founded by an ex-slave, William Crowley, born in 1847, and now, out of distress, Satan seeks to flatter them because this is their hour to reunite with Christ. Jacob's third son, Levi, not Judah, his fourth, was eternally promised to reign not as king, but as the Lord's priest. The Bible shows Satan's work in this hour whereby he stands by to resist the Holy Spirit's efforts to cleanse them for this calling. But to teach that Jesus is black, as they so do, is a vain and indefinitive label, a patronizing but empty accolade, a disguised Confederacy-style pat on the head so as to win their nodding appeasement before the proverbial cake explodes in their face. They are urged to join this work to find their appeasement. Why? Because Levi can serve in a way that no Jewish lawyer can so do. Once he is re-inherited to his original calling, he can ceremonially purge the sins of his house so that they can in turn proceed to cleanse the 144,000, Jacob's end-time house. So to them I say, if you're hungry, then let the Son of Man give you your birthday cake. Think, these past 400 years, black or white, Jesus has not fully reversed the curse of slavery. Satan knows that Christ, the dove who abode clandestinely and hid upon Jesus, once received through this legal channel, will bring that benefit. Because Jesus was not a son of Adam. And since all races were forged by the triplet sons of Noah after the flood, none can claim Jesus to be from any existing race. Remember, they all were born in the likeness of Adam. And Adam's likeness was to ignore the counsel of Christ. To make Jesus Adam's son is to make him ungodly and to deny his connection to the Father. I remind you again that which Moses told Israel. Quote, when the Most High divided the nations, their inheritance, when? He separated the sons of Adam. He set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel, the 144,000. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 8 and 9. Thereby the four, Noah and his three sons, like Adam and Eve, were co-ed men who gave us the human species today. Afterwards, just as multiple languages emerged, also the same with multiple races. Just as none spoke Kenyan, nor English, Hebrew, nor Russian, nor Chinese in the days of Noah, Likewise, none were deemed to be red or yellow, black or white. Making Jesus black then is done by use of Jewish imagination to avert the law, the condemned practice in the days of Jeremiah. We avoid this deception merely by the walk which Christ commends. Paul warns of the penalty of an evil mega walk, a walk after the flesh. To boot, David prophesied, "He that walketh in a perfect way, he shall serve me. He that worketh deceit shall not dwell within my house. He that telleth lies shall not tarry in my sight. I will early destroy all the wicked of the land." Psalms 101, verses 6 through 8. Worshipping under the auspices that Jesus was black is a condemned walk after the flesh. It is the fruit of condemned Jewish imagination, which requires the litigation of God's power of attorney to correct. Africans are Hamitic people. The Asians were Japhetic, and the Hebrews were Semitic. Each have divergent ranges of skin tone. Jesus, as proven in part 1, was not a son of Adam through Noah. Thus, he could not be a son of Ham, Japheth, or Shem. If nothing else, this theme must resonate. One's likeness is a spiritual quality, and Jesus did not have the likeness of Adam. Regardless of the skin tone inherited from his mother, it did not qualify him to be African, Asian, or European. And mind you, Jesus' spirit, we must adopt. Consider an example in nature. It's shocking. Hopefully some of you are watching nature pictures like I do. And so you'll notice that tigers hate leopards. Such is their spiritual inclination. To avoid being killed, the leopard should structure his walk in a way that strays not too close to the tiger. Instead, he has the spirit to flee to the treetops for protection. Search and you will see there are black tigers and black leopards. See the images on your screen. But I ask, should the black leopard, upon seeing the black tiger, ignore his spirit and presume solidarity? Their common complexion cannot make them soul brothers. Instead, the leopard must still maintain caution and walk a safe distance from the tiger. We too do wise to walk by the Spirit and not by the flesh. Christ said, "It is the Spirit that quickeneth, the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. But there are some of you that believe not." John chapter 6, verses 63 and 64. Also, Paul, in additional confirmation, said, "There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. So that they that are in the flesh cannot please God." Romans chapter 8, verses 1, verses 4 through 8. A man honors the Father by his honor of the Son, per John 5:23 quoted above. To teach that Jesus was Hamitic is to deny that he was the only begotten of the Father, and to make him a son of Adam, a sinner, one whose spirit is to cancel the Word and ignore the Word of God. Such is a great dishonor for both Jesus and Father. Also remember, Adam needed a helpmeet, Eve. Thereby she completed his manhood, for it says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. Do you get it? The them of the text that God refers to being created was defined as him, man. So co-ed was Adam, that Eve was forged not from the dust of the earth as was Adam, but from his body, his rib. To the contrary, though God inseminated Mary, she did not complete God. To teach that Jesus was black is to openly embrace not the Bible, but Jewish imagination, and to corrupt the Christian church's walk, a dynamically destructive cake. So I urge them not to fall into this sophistry, for to reject Jesus as the only begotten in this age of enlightenment is to be like Cain, and by use of opiates, nod your spirit away from Christ. Of this, for those who trust the key of knowledge, it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already, because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. John chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. Still, more ignorance abounds because imaginary and illegal doctrines drip from our lips and exemplify impure speech or profanity. When a people used to say black, it meant the children of America's former slaves, who also were called colored, then Negroes, then Afro-Americans, and now apparently black again. Other studies prove that Christ calls them Jerusalem, the descendants of the subdivision of all 12 tribes who were anciently and separately relocated in that city as Israel's congressional delegation, making Jerusalem their namesake. They needed to be there to conveniently petition the King of Israel. This until the day of their Trumpian deportation. In time they rebelled, and diverging from other Hebrew brethren, they were scattered into Africa. But the adoption of the skin tone of their African mothers of their new land, like the leopard, still could not forge solidarity with their African captors. They had different spiritualities. Such explains why they were sold into slavery to Europeans. But today, God's lawyer must legally purify your speech. Prophecy says as much. And I quote from Zephaniah chapter 3. For then will I turn to a people a pure language, that they may call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. Zephaniah chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. Now let us begin our solidarity under Christ, not by using the bywords of our enemies to define us, but by the pure speech of the Bible. Matthew 23 scrolling shows that Jerusalem is the name of the Lord's preference. He scattered us, and now he seeks to redeem us back under his wings. This without regard to complexion. Like the chameleon, our flesh reflects our environment and transformed our skin. But even the recent U.S. election will witness that many immigrant black people, ignoring our passion, voted to reinstall the Confederacy under the guise of mega Republicans. This experience proves that by a walk after the flesh, we have no solidarity or kindred brotherhood from immigrants of Africa or even the Caribbean. I offer the 1994 example of Rwanda to expound further. Just as today you see whites persecuting other whites, as exemplified by the Russian-Ukrainian war, likewise in Africa, the Hutu of Rwanda sought the genocidal destruction of their fellow countrymen, the Tutsi. You may know them better as the Watusi. Both had the same rich, dark chocolate skin and the same national history, but not the same spirit. 800,000 Tutsi were killed in that controversy. So in wisdom, one must ask, if Jesus were African, what side of their genocidal dispute would he choose? Also, would either side seek a closer brotherhood with Jerusalem? Do not we ourselves persecute each other? I am a perfect example. Against much opposition, I taught these past 30 years that the 144,000 were the sons of America's former slaves. But my Black Seventh-day Adventist Protestant Christian Church persecuted not just me, but my wife and children. They sought for me my spiritual death by disfellowship. Their evil spirit emanated from a fear of insulting their white brethren in leadership. So I wonder aloud, if we cannot even embrace ourselves in America, why should we look abroad? I offer one more analogy. Remember Clark Gable? He was born in 1901. He was called the King of Hollywood for 35 years. But that came with one secret. He was a black man who, as evidenced by his picture, looked white. Many such stars now pervade the landscape. I could not begin to try to name them all. All fall under Jesus' classification, Jerusalem. Thus I ask, if Jesus were indeed black, would he look like Clark Gable or the Hutu people? Ponder as you reform your ideas and clean up your language. But that just relayed to me another example that I want to force into this study before we enter into our closing. Just recently reported this morning to her ears that in the Congo, Islamic Africans kidnapped from their homes Christians, 70 of them, and took them to their Christian church and decapitated them. What side of that dispute do you think Jesus would fall on? I urge you to ponder as you reform your ideas and clean up your language. Then we can win our peace to know that, regardless of skin and complexion, Christ seeks our redemption. Yesterday's path has been washed from our feet so that now we can be redeemed. Let this be the song that your heart loves to sing. The same was ancient David's emotional travail also. He was hated in Israel even after he became king. His mother was from a hated people, the Canaanites, and he went to the grave praying that in the day of salvation today, men would not judge him by his flesh, but by his spirit. His prayers today are answered in our redemption. And the Lord found his mirror image. He told David that he, Christ, found the real David, the shining star from Adam that is the perfect man, the one who walks with Christ. He is the Jew that shall inherit all things. So we close part 2 of our study, Jewish Soliloquy.